You've done all the work, prepared meticulously for race day. Don't mess it up by not thinking about your travel, especially when you are moving across multiple time zones. Today we're going to share 4 simple things that you need to be aware of when traveling to a race, and 1 secret hack that's going to prevent you from getting sick and allow you to deliver on race day.
What is jet lag? Essentially, jet lag is a change in your circadian rhythm, so changes in your sleep patterns when we're moving across time zones. For jet lag to be a thing, you have to move across 3 time zones, and that essentially leads me into saying the difference between jet lag and travel fatigue. Devlin's going to be talking about travel fatigue in a lot more detail a little bit later on, but let me just give you an overview for now. As I mentioned, jet lag is changes in your sleep patterns as you move across time zones. Travel fatigue is just the fatigue you get from traveling. So generally, you're not moving across too many time zones or 1 to 3 time zones, but you're tired from traveling because it's been a long flight or a long train ride, and really you're getting tired or fatigued from all of that kind of travel. So if you've experienced jet lag, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's not a fun thing, but if you've never experienced it, let me give you a brief idea as to what that is like. It may be the middle of the day, but you cannot keep your eyes open and you just want to fall asleep, or the alternative, it's midnight and you're supposed to be sleeping and you just cannot fall asleep at all. It's like you've had a million Red Bulls and cups of coffee and you just can't fall asleep. And so it's a very frustrating aspect, and as runners, when you're traveling for races, this is something that can really affect your performance. As I mentioned earlier, the changes in time zones is really how we determine jet lag, and it's a change over 3 time zones, so 3 different hour time zones that will affect the jet lag or cause jet lag more prominently. As we move east, you can account for a day per time zone in your recovery period, and if you're traveling west, you can count half a day per time zone as to the amount of time that you may need to recover. Generally, people find traveling east harder, and that's really because you're going back in time, if I can put it like that, as opposed to coming west where you're going ahead of time, and that's a lot easier to manage. So how do we deal with this? If you're traveling to go do a major race, and you know, I live in South Africa, so most of the races I have to go do is a big amount of travel. So did Chicago recently, so I was traveling west, and that's a big flight, so it is both travel fatigue and jet lag. And so how do we mitigate these things? How do we deal with jet lag? There's a number of things that have been proven in the science that work really well. One of these is exposure to light exposure. If you're traveling east, we really want to get some good light exposure early in the morning. You want to be able to get natural light, as much natural light as you can, as early in the morning. That'll help change your circadian rhythms. There's a way your brain registers light, and it affects the melatonin in your body, and that will really help you change those circadian rhythms and help you deal with this jet lag. As you move more west, you want to get light exposure in the afternoon. Ideally, we want to have as much natural light as we can. However, if you're going to a place where the sun doesn't shine that much, yes, you can help that with artificial light. Blue lights, essentially from your cell phone or your laptops, is also going to have an effect on this. So as an example, if you're traveling west and you need that light exposure in the afternoon, you want to stay away from things like blue lights, your laptop, your cell phone, TVs, early in the morning, because that is also going to affect that circadian rhythm. Another really effective way, it's probably the most effective along with light exposure, is managing your sleep or banking sleep. Generally, we don't feel like we can bank sleep, but if you know you're going to be traveling soon, you want to be able to try and if you're traveling east, you want to try and go to bed an hour earlier over a couple of days, and if you're traveling west, you want to go to bed an hour later, and do that over a couple of days. So if you normally go to sleep at 10 p.m., go to sleep at 9 p.m., the next day 8 p.m. So it doesn't affect your general sleep patterns, but you're just adjusting your circadian rhythm a little bit more as you're going along. Along with sleep, obviously naps can be very effective. However, you don't want to get that nap too close to the actual bedtime. You want to try and get that nap in sort of in the midday. And a nice effective tip or trick for napping is have a cup of coffee or an energy drink just before you're about to have a nap, because that caffeine will kick in about 20 to 30 minutes and wake you up in time, so you don't land up napping for about 4 hours. And then lastly, another really effective way to mitigate jet lag is exercise. And we're runners, so I know when I land land in a new city, one of my favorite things to do is go for a run and see the city, and also just to sort of, you know, loosen up a bit. And so if you're traveling east, it's really effective to go for a short jog around 7 a.m. Whereas if you're traveling west, you actually want to go for that jog a little bit later, so between 7 to 10 p.m. I know that sounds really late, but that's what the science is saying, and that is a really great way, to help you loosen up post your travel, your flight, and it'll get rid of all that travel fatigue, but also it can actually, and has been proven to help with the jet lag as well. And then lastly, how we mitigate jet lag is the use of pharmaceuticals. This is highly recommended that you speak to your doctor about this, because the use of melatonin and this regulations are different country to country. So the use of melatonin can be really effective in helping you mitigate a lot of this jet lag. I've worked with doctors as well in the past who are working with athletes who have prescribed sleeping aids so that athletes can sleep on the plane and really maximize that time to adjust that circadian rhythm.
As Shona mentioned, there is a difference between jet lag and travel fatigue. Just to dig a little bit deeper into travel fatigue itself, travel fatigue is really seen as being in the same time zone or similar time zones, whereas jet lag obviously crossing multiple time zones. Travel fatigue is really where you are getting tired. It's exactly what it says, getting tired. You're fatigued from sitting for long periods of time. That could be sitting on a train, an aeroplane, sitting in a car, driving 4 or 5 hours to get to an event because it's not in your hometown, for example. So the travel fatigue aspect of it is really just being exhausted at the end of a long trip. We usually see travel fatigue, or we categorize travel fatigue as being anything less than 3 time zones crossed. So that will contribute to travel fatigue and not jet lag. And there are 2 types of travel fatigue as well. It can either be an acute fatigue, which is from today's trip. The trip I've just done, I'm exhausted, and how do we recover from that? And then you get an accumulative travel fatigue, which is typically like teams that travel a lot because they play multiple games across wide open country spaces in a week. And that is an accumulative fatigue where they're constantly just on the road traveling all week long. How do we work around these now? Sleep is a really key aspect. We want you to try and prioritize getting good quality sleep. There are ways of doing this. Light avoidance is absolutely key. Now, that's not always possible. We do completely understand that. If you're on a plane and you're flying overnight, it's usually a little bit easier. They turn down the cabin lights. There's obviously a couple of reading lights and that available or on. You can work around those, and a really simple way of doing that is just an eye covering or an eye mask that you can put on to try and darken the environment as much as possible. The same would apply if you're sitting on a bus or in a car, trying to get sleep where possible, and then when you're arriving at your destination, trying to prioritize sleep as well. Early night sleep, sleeping a little bit later if it does allow for it, if you obviously don't have a race the next day. Other ways of trying to improve your sleep is avoiding screen time. So again, let's put ourselves on an airplane, you watching movies all night long or all flight long. Try and eliminate the amount of screen time and reduce it, especially before you do want to try and sleep. So cut back an hour to 2 before. Try meditation if that's something you have tried in the past, if that's something that might work for you. Reading a book instead will often just relax you a little bit more and allow for a better night's sleep. And then there are other ways, so we can speak medications. We're always a little bit hesitant to just prescribe medication, so that is something you need to consult with your doctor about, making sure that it is something that is not going to make you drowsy, especially if you have an event the next day that you're traveling to. And more importantly, making sure that it is legal. So there are drug testings, doesn't matter what age category you might fall into, there's always the risk of being tested. And not even the risk of being tested, just morally making sure that what you are taking is approved and is legal. And those sort of things can be found on the World Anti-Doping Agency's website. So you'll be able to make sure that what is prescribed by the doctor is legal for you to take. Another thing we can look at to try and improve or recover from travel fatigue is just movement. Again, a little bit easier if you are on a plane where you can get up and you can walk around. On a bus, still possible. Sitting in the car, not always possible. So just simple things like wiggling your toes, moving the legs around helps. But if you are able to get up, walk, move a little bit, that really does help. Just keeping a bit of blood flow, it stops you stiffening up when you're sitting for long periods of time. And if you are on a plane in particular, it does help with reducing that risk of potential deep vein thrombosis. So what that is really just potential blood clotting, which also can be quite risky. Another thing for us to consider is our hydration. Now, if you're sitting on a plane, again, I'm using the plane as the referral, but if you're sitting on a plane for a long period of time, that is a dry environment. So think about an 8-hour flight or a 14-hour flight. There is a risk of you dehydrating if you're not hydrating well enough. So for long periods of time in a dry environment, we could dehydrate. And another thing to that is if we've got dry airways, and in particular our throat passages, we have a risk here of getting sick. Germs love to fester in dry, warm environments. And if we're not keeping our throat passageways nice and lubricated, there is also another risk of getting sick here at the same time. Just to tie in with hydration a little bit, we do generally recommend avoiding caffeine and alcohol. We do know that both those substances are stimulants, ties in with sleep. We don't want anything that is going to keep us restless throughout a period that we are trying to actually improve our sleep and get a little bit of rest. I know that's a bit of a contentious subject because I myself will struggle if I don't have my cup of coffee in the morning, but just think about the bigger picture at hand here. A really key factor to consider as well is your nutrition. If you're traveling by bus or in a car, you're able to pack your own meals, so a little bit easier to control. Being on a plane, obviously, if you haven't done that and you're getting plane or airport food, that's a little bit less out of control, but you need to consider what you are taking in and try as far as possible to keep that to low energy meals. We still need you eating, we still need you keeping your body fueled, but again, I'm gonna bring back to the sleep aspect. You're sitting for long periods of time, you're not burning off any energy, so that does keep you a little bit restless as well and keep you awake when you are trying to rest. So think about prepping your meals, think about what you are taking in, and try and keep that to low energy meals during your travel.
I've done quite a bit of traveling for races, and so over the years I've learned the hard way. So let me give you some of my experiences and things that I've learned that can maybe help you for your future travel and how to get around those. So some tips and tricks that I've learned over the years. Firstly, you don't want to land in your destination and your luggage doesn't arrive. Then all of a sudden you don't have your running shoes and you have to go off and spend 3,000 Rand or $100 or $300 on a new pair of shoes. So you really want to make sure that you have your race kit in your hand luggage. So if your luggage goes missing, you at least have that with you and you know you can at least complete your race. Secondary to that, you want to keep your race nutrition in your luggage for the exact same reason. Just obviously be very careful in terms of the travel regulations and how much you can take, but for the most part, a gel is normally around 30 milliliters, and that is well under the regulations for international travel and how much liquid you can take. You really want to keep the stuff you want to have on race day in your hand luggage just in case your luggage does go missing. Another great trick that I've learned is to keep my foam roller in my hand luggage. I don't have one of those big, large foam rollers. I actually have one that is about this big and it's easy to use. And on long haul flights, I find that really effective because I can stand up and walk around and move around and actually use my foam roller to help with some circulation and really just get things moving along. Some other tips and tricks: if you're having a late evening flight, make sure you eat dinner at the airport so that you're eating what you know. So if you have a sensitivity to different foods, eat what you know before you get on that plane. This will also help you to fall asleep when you're ready and you don't have to wait for that in-flight service to get your food, so you don't have to be hungry and stay awake. Or the alternate, you don't have to be woken up at 3 a.m. to get your breakfast from the in-flight service as well. A major tip, and this is key, is avoid alcohol on the flight. You want to stay as hydrated as possible. Hydrated with water and not alcohol. Alcohol will dehydrate you, and you want to get to your destination before your race as hydrated as possible. And as you're flying, that is one of the effects that alcohol has. It dehydrates you even more. and rather enjoy that drink after your race and on the flight home when you're celebrating.
So the last thing you want to do after you've trained very, very hard for your race is to get onto a plane surrounded by people and then you end up getting sick. There are a few things you can do to minimize your risk of getting sick. We've just gone through 2 years of the pandemic with COVID, and I think most of us now are quite used to masking up. So the first thing you can do to protect yourself is to mask up. Masking is very, very effective in preventing you from breathing in other people's germs and for you also breathing out and maybe affecting other people. Sanitizing your hands is very important. So if you go to the bathroom, wash your hands. It's probably a wise idea for you to carry hand wipes with you so you can wipe your hands down and your surfaces around you as well. So other people around you are touching things and you want to be able to wipe down surfaces and make sure that you're not interacting with things. The easiest way to spread bacteria and contaminants is actually through your hands. Your hands are a huge source of bacteria. So what you want to avoid doing is touching your face. So if you're sitting down and you touch the seat in front of you, don't touch your face before you've wiped down or you've sanitized.
Time for the secret hack. You've traveled a long way, been exposed to many, many people in confined spaces, and so your risk of getting sick is increasing all the time. One of your body's first lines of defense against disease is ensuring that you have moist passageways. And so you need to have like an antibacterial cream or something similar that you can keep applying to your nasal passages to make sure that they stay moist, and make sure that you are constantly drinking water because you are in an environment, particularly in an aeroplane, that is very dry and dries out your passageways. Getting to race day is just one piece of the puzzle. You can do everything right in the build-up, but if you don't do these 6 things, you're not going to get it right on race day.